1492, Christopher Columbus, along with his 3 ships, the Nina, the Pinata, and the Saint Maria, sailed the big ocean blue and discovered America. But I mean, there are already people here, and he still called them Indians because he thought, oh, okay, this must be India. People didn't ridicule him because he thought the world was flat. No, they ridiculed him because Chris thought the distance from Asia to Portugal was only 2,400 miles, when in actuality, it was 10,000 miles away, not to mention there was a huge freaking continent between them. It just makes you want to say, boy, were they wrong! And that's the theme of this video. We've come a long way in modern medicine. We have vaccines, and x-rays, and MRI scanners, and we learned to wash our hands before operations because we didn't used to do that before. Boy, were they wrong! Yes, I am going to say that every time. So obviously, with new discoveries in medicine, we'll realize that some of the things we used to do were wrong. No, don't put your baby on its back. It could throw up and choke itself. No, don't put it on its stomach. It can get SIDS. No, put it on its head. And it also comes as no surprise that some of the things that we used to think were helpful were actually killing us. One such thing is mercury. You see, we didn't even realize that this stuff might be bad for us until 1926. Before that, we used mercury in everything. Okay, that's an exaggeration. We've been mining mercury since the Roman times and used mercury in paint and hats and thermometers. And back in ye old days, people who made hats with mercury had a higher chance of getting dementia. And that's where the term mad as a hatter came from, because they were mad with dementia. And also, just a PSA, we put mercury in the swirly light bulb, so if you break one, well, it's time to die. And in ancient history, some healers promised that by consuming deadly brews containing mercury, their patients would gain eternal life and the ability to walk on water. No. One of the most famous cases was a Chinese emperor called Qin Shi Huang, who died after ingesting a mercury pill that was supposed to make him immortal. Boy, were they wrong! Also, speaking of ingesting poisonous food, Europeans thought that the tomato was poisonous. What? So apparently, rich Europeans ate their tomatoes on pewter plates, which, guess what, had lead in them. And because tomatoes are acidic, whenever people ate tomatoes off the plates, the fruit, because they're a fruit, remember, would leach lead from the plate and become poisoned, and then people would eat it and die. And everyone blamed the tomato, but the real killer was right under them the whole time. And apparently there's a story about George Washington where one of his cooks tried to assassinate him by putting a tomato in his soup. But that didn't work because they're harmless. And also Snoop said the whole story was false. So boy, were they wrong! Here's something else. In medieval times, back before we really knew about diseases and immune systems, if someone was sick, doctors would just be like, ugh, just got bad blood, man. So what the doctors would do to remedy this would be to slit your wrists and let them bleed all of their blood out. This was called bloodletting. And also something cool is that it wasn't surgeons doing these procedures, it was barbers. But surgeon barbers, not the ones who cut hair. And they were called that because they carried big scissors around and cut people's wrists. And also, according to Wikipedia, that's the reason barbershops have red and white poles in front of them, because the red symbolizes blood and the white bandages. Or I could be totally wrong, I'm not doing any more research into it. But back to bloodletting, no, it's incredibly stupid. In fact, our blood has white blood cells in it, which kill viruses, so boy, were they wrong! Okay, what else we got? So do you remember in 10th grade chemistry when you had to remember all those elements on the periodic table? And remember how you failed that test and thought, man, if only the periodic table was shorter and had like 4 elements, and those elements were earth, water, fire, and air. Well, if you lived in the BC to early 16th century, you wouldn't have had to take that online chem class because you'd have been right! And apparently Aristotle said that there was a 5th element, aether, which, according to the second Thor movie, is one of the 6 Infinity Stones. And people believed this until this freaking nerd was like, actually there's a bajillion elements, and now everyone has to memorize them. You know, I wonder what those BuzzFeed articles that are like 9 things you thought were true but aren't would have been like in medieval times.